Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a scalpel to something that I think most of us just assume is automatic, how to read something and then summarize it.
Mhm.
You know the routine, right? You get a big document, you jot down a few bullet points, and you call it a summary. Done.
Right. Task complete.
Exactly. But the academic sources we've been looking at, these are pulled from some really specialized reading courses. They show that this is not some simple task. It's a high-level discipline that requires, and this is a direct quote, intensive brain work.
That phrase, intensive brain work, that really is the key to this whole deep dive, isn't it?
It is.
We're trying to shift the focus from, just passive reading to critical reading, and then applying that to a very specific, very rigorous method called Precis writing.
Okay, so break that down. Precis writing.
Think of it like this. Passive reading is like recognizing the notes on a page of music. But critical reading and Précis writing, that's like analyzing the harmonies, understand the composer's actual intent, and then perfectly conducting the whole orchestra with just a fraction of the original score.
I love that analogy. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to try and distill those, rigorous academic rules, the steps, the constraints, all the non-negotiables into clear, actionable knowledge for you.
It's the shortcut.
It's the shortcut, yeah. This is what's going to enhance your critical reading skills, whether you're, I don't know, analyzing a dense legal contract or writing a briefing for a board meeting.
And we have to start right at the bedrock of this, which is the expectation of understanding.
Okay.
True reading comprehension, according to these sources, means you're grappling with two very different kinds of information. It's not just what's explicitly stated.
That's also what's implied.
Exactly, what's implied. That's where the real work begins.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where that intensive brain work kicks in immediately, isn't it? The stated facts, they're the easy part. But the subtext, the implied meaning, that takes real engagement.
And there's a vocabulary trap just waiting for you there.
How so?
Well, you have to remember that your understanding of any word or phrase has to come from its meaning within the context of the passage. I mean, we're speaking English. We forget how many words have multiple, sometimes even contradictory meanings.
Right, so context is king.
It's not just helpful, it's everything. It's the only way to determine the author's exact message.
Okay, so that expectation of deep contextual understanding, that leads us straight into the first big commitment this work requires.
The necessity of rereading. And this is completely non-negotiable in the discipline. The material just insists that a single reading is not enough, period.
Not enough for what, though?
Not enough for true comprehension. The text is very clear. The more you read a passage, the deeper your understanding gets. This whole process, this repetition, is what lets you identify the main idea, grasp how it's organized, and appreciate all those subtle things like the author's tone and attitude.
So if you just give an important document a quick glance, you're basically forfeiting half of the meaning.
At least half, yeah.
So if that reading commitment is the foundation, then the structure we're building on top of it is the précis.
Which is, in common language, just summarizing.
Just summarize it.
Correct. A précis is defined as the gist or main theme of a passage, expressed in few words. But here's the paradox right away, and it's a brilliant one.
Go on.
Despite the required brevity, the précis has to be both lucid and full.
Okay, now you have to explain that.
Yeah.
I can already hear people asking, how can a summary be full and brief at the same time?
Yeah.
That just sounds like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? But it's full of meaning, not full of detail. The core idea here is that a précis expresses only the main theme, shorn of all unimportant details and explanations. Think of a sculptor. You start with this huge block of marble, but your goal isn't to display the marble.
It's to reveal the figure inside.
Exactly. You're stripping away the adjectives, the anecdotes, all the redundant phrases, leaving only the essential functional skeleton of the argument.
And to make sure you really commit to that stripping away process, we come to the ironclad rule of Précis writing.
The word count rule. This is the ultimate test of your compression skills.
And the source is unambiguous.
Completely. A précis should not contain more than a third of the number of words in the original passage. That's it. That's the benchmark. You start with 600 words, you cannot go over 200.
1/3. That's brutal compression. I mean, that feels almost impossible without losing some of the nuance, right?
Well, that intensity is precisely the point. It forces you to move beyond just surface understanding into, true core comprehension.
Okay, so we know the stakes, we know the very tight boundaries. Let's jump into the actual workflow. Phase 1. Intensive concentration and discovery.
And this is where that high level of concentration and deep attention becomes just mandatory. If you're distracted here, you will fail the word count test later on.
Because you won't know what's important enough to keep.
We won't know what to cut. Yeah.
So step one, the source says, is the first thorough, careful reading. And you're doing this specifically to get a general idea of the meaning.
You're just aiming for familiarity. You shouldn't really stop until the subject and the main points feel, entirely familiar to you.
And to guide that focus, there are these 4 catalyst questions you're supposed to ask yourself over and over.
Right. They're just tools to force active engagement. Things like, what is the writer saying? What does it mean? What is the subject? And what exactly am I reading? It just locks in your focus.
Right. And while you're doing that first pass, you can start thinking about a suitable title. That little phrase or short sentence that just perfectly sums it up.
And a quick tip here from the source. It says that while you might find a key sentence that sums it all up at the beginning or the end,
You can't count on it.
you can. It
Yeah.
warns that this is not always the case. Often you have to synthesize that title yourself, which, again, is a demonstration that you've mastered the text.
So once you've got the general idea, maybe a potential title, you move on to the second read. This is the deep dive within the deep dive.
Yes, this is the granular level. You have to do this one slowly, sentence by sentence, word by word, to clear up any ambiguity and really grasp the author's exact purpose. The source reminds us a single word can be of prime importance.
One connecting word or a specific adjective can change everything.
It can completely alter your interpretation.
So after all that reading, all that note-taking,
Yeah.
now the selection process starts. And this feels like the moment that defines whether you write a good précis or a bad one.
Absolutely. The material calls the process of selection. So finalizing what's essential versus what's unimportant. It calls that the toughest part of the whole thing. It just takes a lot of practice and judgment.
So how do you guide that decision? How do you know what's essential?
The best guide is the main theme itself. The subject you identified in those first 2 readings is your North Star. It helps you distinguish between, say, a necessary data point and just an illustrative example.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If the theme is the economic impact of automation, you'd keep the statistics on job losses, but you might cut the personal anecdote about a single factory worker. The detail is gone, but the meaning, the core point, remains.
That makes perfect sense. So the last step in this phase is just preparation. You jot down your notes, the title, and you list out the essential details you've decided to keep.
Now you've got your raw material.
And now we enter the compression chamber, phase 2, drafting and compression.
This is where the technical rules kick in, and they are unforgiving. First off, you have to stick to the limits. Like we said, if it's 1/3, you count the words and you divide by 3.
And the rule is absolute. It says you can use fewer words, but in no case may you exceed the limit. It forces discipline.
It really does. And then you have these non-negotiable rules for the draft itself. Rule number 1, the précis must be in your own words.
All of it.
All of it. You cannot lift phrases or sentences from the original text.
Okay, hang on. If I can't use any phrases from the original, isn't there a risk that I'll lose the author's unique phrasing? Or maybe, I don't know, the scientific accuracy if it's a technical paper?
That's the difference between copying and comprehending. Using your own words proves you actually understood the concept, not just the string of words used to describe it.
I see.
You're trying to maintain the author's intent and voice, but you have to synthesize it through your own language. It's a sign of intellectual mastery.
Got it. Okay, so use my own words, but keep the author's message intact. What's the next rule for drafting?
Rule number 2, the précis has to be well connected. You can divide it into paragraphs if the subject naturally shifts.
Like from problem to solution.
Exactly. But those paragraphs have to flow logically. It can't just be a list of disjointed notes. It needs to read like a single, cohesive document.
And rule number 3, which seems critical for any kind of professional briefing,
Yeah.
the précis must be complete and self-contained.
Yes. It has to convey its message fully without requiring the reader to go back and check the original text. I mean, if your CEO has to go dig up an 80-page report to understand your 1-page summary, you failed.
You have completely failed the mission.
Utterly. And because of that strict 1/3 limit, the language has to be just, rigorously pruned. This is what the source calls redundancy pruning.
So no repetition, no flowery language.
Zero room for it. The language has to be simple, direct, grammatical, and idiomatic.
Can you give us a practical example of that kind of pruning?
Excellent question. So think about academic writing. You might see a phrase like, the consensus of opinion amongst experts was unanimous.
Okay, I've seen that 1,000 times.
It's 7 words of total redundancy. You prune that down to, The experts agreed. You've lost nothing in meaning, but you just saved 5 words. That's a huge gain when you're facing that 1/3 limit.
That makes it feel much more tangible. Okay, so that leads us to the advanced technique, the art of compression. And the source points out something really fascinating here.
Right. It says the writer is not necessarily bound to follow the original order of thought of the passage.
Okay, this is a key insight. Why are we allowed to reorder the original structure? That seems bold.
Because you are distilling the core logic, not just transcribing sentences in order. If you can express the essential meaning more clearly and concisely by restructuring or transposing parts, you should do it.
So this is the difference between simple omission and what the source calls skillful remodeling.
Exactly. If you just omit things, you can break the logical flow. But if you remodel, you are actively re-engineering the remaining pieces for maximum clarity and conciseness.
So just leaving stuff out is the easy way, and it's often the wrong way. But restructuring, rewriting, remodeling, that's the advanced skill. That's where the real brain work is.
Absolutely. You're trying to make the document better, not just shorter. But this restructuring requires great care.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we start moving things around, we could really confuse the reader about who's speaking or when things happened.
Precisely. You have to make sure the sequence of tenses is correct, and you have to maintain a clear differentiation of the various people mentioned.
I have read so many summaries where he or she could refer to 3 different people. It just derails the whole thing.
It's a very common flaw. The source advises that proper names should be used occasionally, even in a short text, just to cut through that pronoun confusion.
Okay, what else?
And finally, you have to be very careful not to lapse into direct speech. A précis should generally be written objectively in indirect discourse. Using direct quotes is a common fault, unless it's one of those rare cases where it's the only way.
So we've read multiple times, we've selected, we've drafted, pruned, maybe even remodeled. Now the final stage, revision.
And the revision mandate is rigorous. You compare your draft carefully with the original to make sure you have included all the important points you picked out at the start.
And if it's still too long?
You have to compress it further, omit more unnecessary words, or again, remodel sentences for better efficiency.
And then there's the integrity check, which is a vital professional tip. Add nothing, make no comment, correct no facts.
Your job is objective synthesis, not being an editor or adding your 2 cents.
Right. Once all that is validated, it's the final polish. You check for spelling, grammar, punctuation, and then you write the fair copy under your chosen heading.
And the language needs to stay simple and direct.
So if we connect this whole demanding process back to the overall objective from the source material, the benefits become really clear. Why do all this?
Well, for critical reading, you develop skills like the ability to infer meanings and analyze text structure at a level most people just never reach.
And crucially, you learn to evaluate arguments critically. You can spot biases, identify reasoning, check the evidence. These are incredibly high-value skills anywhere.
And for the Précis itself, the goals are mastering conciseness and, this is the hardest part, maintaining the original voice and intent of the author. You have to be brief without distorting the message.
You're really building a robust intellectual toolkit.
That's the whole point. It enhances critical reading, fosters analytical thinking, and it translates directly into effective professional communication.
This has been such a necessary breakdown of something that seems so simple, but is actually, incredibly demanding work. We covered the need for a multi-step reading process, not just one pass, and those tight drafting constraints.
That 1/3 rule, the self-contained requirement, and the rule that it has to be in your own words.
It's a process that really demands focus. So as you approach your next important document, a contract, a report, a long article, here's a final thought for you to mull over, building on that key technique we discussed.
The idea of remodeling.
Exactly. The source advises, when you're revising, to condense by remodeling rather than by mere omission.
That's the skill of an analyst, not just a transcriber.
Think about that distinction. If you simply leave out details, you might get a choppy, disjointed summary. But if you take the time to restructure and rewrite the remaining elements, creating new, efficient sentences that preserve the logical flow, then you've achieved the art of the précis. And that choice simple omission versus skilled remodeling. That's the difference between a decent, usable summary and a masterful piece of compression that truly honors and clarifies the original source.
A great concept to take forward. Thank you for diving deep with us.
Thank you.